Call to order this work session of the Board of Trustees for Tuesday, November 12th at 2:02 p.m. And the clerk will attempt to call the roll.
This is going to be a tough one. Thank you, Madam President. We'll start with Trustee Minetto.
Here.
Trustee Kelly's delayed will be on his way. Trustee Caudill. Trustee Clerk, I'm here. Madam President, President Simon Holland.
I am here.
Vice President Melina Raymond. Here. Trustee Calvert. Here. And Student Trustee Nathan. Hi. Nathan Noble, he is here. So we have 6 of the 7 of us, Madam President.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's see. Mr. Sam Gross, would you lead us in the pledge today?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sam. Our next item is public comment. JJ, do we have public comment?
Todd Bailey.
Mr. Bailey, welcome.
Thank you, Madam President. Good to see you back. I want to bring your attention to something that's important about today's meeting. Welcome to our guests. Here's our presentation that's coming up today. And as you can see, here are the people we're going to be working with. And then the very next slide, I got this off the district website, by the way. The very next slide, you can see right here, the mission is sideways. And I didn't do this, by the way, because here's the next slide. But yeah, the mission is sideways. Let me explain what I mean by that. I believe, along with others in the community, that the next superintendent was probably decided on informally 6 months ago. And I believe that with 90 to 95% certainty. Inside this envelope is the name of the next superintendent. I've signed the back and dated it. I'm going to photograph it. I'm going to put it on my Twitter account and my website. If I'm wrong, I will donate $100 to the Madam President's school of her choice or district program. I will open this letter, this envelope, when you hire the next superintendent. Until then, it will be stored in a safe for safekeeping to ensure its security and validity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Well, I just do want to confirm that there have been no discussions of board members about who the next superintendent should be. So, Mr. Bailey, you can go on Johnny Carson and be Carmack and hold your envelope up to your forehead, because we have not had any discussions about that today. So, other public comment?
Jeff Church.
Mr. Church, welcome.
Good afternoon. Jeff Church, candidate for Washoe County School Board, District A. The Washoe County School District continues to refuse to hire an auditor to oversee into WC1 and capital project funds. And that's in spite of the repeated recommendations by the WCSD Audit Committee. And I invite you to look at the minutes from the last meeting and or many of the other previous meetings. Now, why is that so important? At the last trustee meeting, or the last one I attended, I spoke about the need for this. And I was told by the chair that we have an annual audit and everything was fine. Well, it's not. The annual audit actually found a number of misspendings, a number of misrepresentations, and it found misspending of WC1 money for principals. I can't be more clear. The audit found misspending of WC1 money, capital projects, for at least 2 or more principals. This is a spot check. It's unknown how many other persons, superintendents, administrators, or others were paid out of WC1 money. It is suspected that this misuse and promises broken by WCSD is the tip of the iceberg. We need a full-time WC1 capital projects auditor. In the handout, I have a number of quotes from the school district and from Mr. Pete Eckhart of the school district. He defines school administrators as principals, area superintendents, curriculum instruction staff. He goes on to say, School administration would not be funded and legally cannot be funded with capital funds. But yet the facts are they were, and this could be going on as we speak today. So I don't know how else to phrase it other than say you've been caught with your pants down. Is the money going to be reimbursed? Has it been reimbursed? Has it been fixed? And I want to move on to the last sentence of my handout to you. When I brought this up in the past, this was officially from the Washoe County School District. It's put out to the community. Mr. Church, that's me, has continually made baseless and slanderous, libelous allegations against Mr. Eckhart and WCSD. Again, Mr. Church is being placed on notice that if he continues to perpetrate this misrepresentation, he will be doing so with intentional disregard for the truth, giving rise to a defamation cause of action, end quote. Well, I ask you to tell me, what have I done so that I can correct it? What have I been wrong on? How have I defamed anybody? Because I can't stop doing it unless you notice me as what I did wrong. I'm a candidate for school board, and you're defaming me and libeling me by telling me that I'm libeling you. You've spent money for principals. Pete Eckhart in the school district said that wasn't possible, but you did it. I brought it to your attention, and you threatened to sue me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And just for the record, that was a notation in the annual audit and has been corrected. Those costs were moved, and we did provide that information to the public. And I do want to comment that I too have been very anxious to see the capital projects auditor move forward, and I did comment to the staff the other day that we've been able to build new schools before we got that auditor in place. So let's get going on that. Okay, is there other public comment?
That's all I have.
Thank you, JJ. Okay, do we have an action to adopt the agenda? All right, thank you, Trustee Minetto. Motion by Minetto. Second by Vice President Raymond. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, because of the interrelatedness of the motion of the actions on our agenda today, we are going to open agenda items 2.01 through 2.04 together to allow for discussion, possible action throughout, because these are very interconnected. And I'll just read off what those agenda items are. First is presentation and discussion of the recommended superintendent search process by JG Consulting for information discussion only. And then 2.02, discussion and possible action to determine groups within the community, their roles in the superintendent search process, and methods for engaging the community groups, such as the use of town hall meetings, surveys, and or forming a community input group to advise the consultant as a part of its evaluation process in forwarding recommendations to the Board of Trustees, and to define a draft timeline for all search process activities, including the scheduling of subsequent work sessions to finalize the superintendent job description and compensation range, and to conduct finalist candidate interviews. And then 2.03 is discussion possible action to determine the Board of Trustees' desired experience, skills, and characteristics of the next superintendent of schools for the Washoe County School District. And then 2.04 is discussion possible action to finalize Exhibit A of the executive search contract approved on October 29, 2019, as revised based on the actions taken on the items on this agenda. And then 2.05 we'll go on to next. Okay, so those are the items that we are opening for discussion now, and I will turn it over to Emily Ellison, our Chief Human Resources Officer, and James Guerra, President and CEO of JG Consulting. Emily.
Great. Thank you, President Simon Holland. Good afternoon, members of the Board of Trustees. We're excited to be here today, and James is going to do most of the talking, but I just wanted to provide some introductory comments. As President Simon Holland mentioned in the agenda items, the thought process really was to have James share his overview of a typical search process and then really get into the weeds regarding what that process will look like for our district. So like I said, he's going to be behind the wheel and do most of the presenting and talking during this time. I'm here obviously for support to answer any questions that are really specific to our district, and then also take copious notes so that JJ and I can compare at the end and make sure we captured all of the decisions. So with that, I will turn it over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Good afternoon, board. Thank you again for having me back. It's good to be back in Reno, and we are grateful for the opportunity to serve you in this capacity, and we are eager to get started. So for those of you who had an opportunity to visit with me in person today, thank you again for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, discussion, and to our student board member, welcome. Thank you for participating in this effort. And again, I want to say thank you for your service to this wonderful community in this district. And as Emily stated, the spirit of today's discussion is to lay the foundation and to establish a framework for the superintendent search. So what we thought we would do in the spirit of transparency for those that are here from the community and those that are watching online who are eager to learn more about the process is to disclose to everyone what our best practices consist of as it relates to the superintendent search process. So what you have before you and what we'll quickly go through and answer any questions you might have as far as the process is just a quick overview, a synopsis of our best practice as it pertains to the superintendent search. So I'm going to take a dive into that process and the protocols and the practices that we have. All right, so everyone has had a chance to visit with me, and again, my name is James Guerra. I'm the president CEO of JG Consulting. It looks like that our company name was cut off there, but my colleagues who will be joining me during all of the in-person activities as they pertain to the stakeholder group meetings, the engagement meetings, town hall meetings, and so forth, will be the two ladies that you see on the screen in front of you. Dr. Pat Leonatus is a former superintendent herself, most recently served as superintendent of schools in the Fort Worth Independent School District, which is also a council member district such as your lovely district. She will be the chief search officer and is the most seasoned and experienced consultant working alongside myself. And then, of course, our local representative is Ms. Terry Janison. She is based in the Las Vegas area, former school board president with Clark County School District, currently serves as a CEO for a autism nonprofit in the Valley. And so they both had other commitments, and they will be present with me during the community stakeholder meeting. So wanted to give you a sense of who the other teammates are. We do have a back office of support who will work remotely during the executive search process. We have interns, we have other faculty members strategically based around the country who will support the recruitment efforts that we engage in with you. So these are the members of the team that you will be introduced to in person here in the near future. All right, so as we think of the mission and this important work that we're engaged in together, there's a few things I'll call attention to on the screen. First, an equitable process, meaning equity for all those involved. Not only you as trustees, but the community, all of the stakeholders, including the students. It's very important that we hear from the students. So we will seek your advice, your counsel, your guidance on which student groups are important for us to engage in and meet with as we seek out the qualities and characteristics of the next superintendent. And that ties into the inclusivity and the transparency of the search process. As I stated during the interview several weeks ago, we will not withhold any information from you or your constituents in the community. Everyone will have an opportunity to engage with the search firm. We'll be readily available to everyone and anyone who is willing to provide us with their input and their candid feedback. And that's incredibly important because this work, again, is engendered in trust. And so we want to feel and present ourselves with that air of trust and that the community can buy into what we're doing as far as representing you in the district. As far as the way the process will be managed, we will provide regular reports to you and to your constituents in the community. Now, of course, with the open meetings laws and records, our layers of communication will go through Emily and then, of course, your general counsel. But the information that we have accessible to us will be accessible to you and to the community at any point. So when we provide our formal and written reports, it'll be in a synthesized manner and a summative report each and every week during the course of our executive search work with you.
James, just a clarifying question. We want to make sure that we don't chill the process by any applicant at any stage being made public before they're ready to be made public. So I just wanted to clarify that at least my expectation, and we certainly want to talk about that today, is that we would make public those people who are perhaps semifinalists or finalists in the process, but not necessarily every single application of anybody that ever applied, because we know that does have a chilling effect on who applies. I don't know, Council, if you want to comment on that, or if there's any other comment on that.
I'd be happy to comment. One of the things that we discussed in setting this up today was how are we going to allow JG Consulting to work with these applicants and go and seek applicants without them having to divulge to their current employer. As you know, Nevada's open meeting law is it's close to the most stringent. Florida probably is. So we really have to figure out ways to allow them to go and do their work and still get those top applicants. And so that's the process. One of the reasons why we've set up some of the processes that we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to, did you have something, Dr. Taylor? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I would agree with that. That was my thinking. I was just holding my comment. Just having served in several public entity CEO executive searches, I found that it's better to have a level of protection, if you will, and that realizing that means that we won't know. And so I think it still is really important for the community to know that they still know what we know, but we won't know very early into the process as well. And that's certainly something as much as I'd like to know everything all the time and really in recognition and respect for the open meeting law, I know that means that there's some things we won't know until we get later into the process. And I'm okay with that in the name of having the best possible and the strongest pool that we can.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. All three of your remarks are absolutely correct. So there's sequential steps and measures that we take during the tenure of our executive search. So the application process hasn't begun yet, right? We still have to define the job profile, the job description, identify the application itself and with the board's approval. So nothing has yet been made for public consumption, which means that candidates have yet to apply officially, although we have had significant interest, inbound inquiries and interest expressed to us, which again is a huge testament to the good work that the district has done to date. And it's a testimony to all of the successes and the celebrations that you've had. So you're absolutely 100% correct. We will divulge the candidate information at the appropriate time, and typically that's at the latter stages of the executive search. And we generally do this in two ways. And we have experience working in other states, such as Florida, and we're currently doing a search in Louisiana for another large urban school system where it's also an open meeting state. And the general tenor of our presentation of candidates, if you will, is in two different buckets. You have Group A, which we consider to be the top recommendations of the total talent pool. Let's just say hypothetically the talent pool consisted of 60 applicants. So Group A is what we would consider perhaps the top 10 of the 60. The delta would be the remaining balance of 50 as Group B. Now, when we present to you the top candidates, that's when you'll have an opportunity to get to hear and learn who the candidates are. And that's generally done in an open session, in a workshop or a work session similar to the one we're having this afternoon. And then you'll also have an opportunity to ask us about the other candidates if you'd like to hear or learn more about them. Because again, in the spirit of transparency and the point that I underscored earlier about an equitable process, we will not withhold any information. So at that point in time, you'll have an opportunity to get to know who all of the candidates are. And that's typically in the last third of the executive search process. And at that point, of course, the candidates' names become made for public consumption. So if the candidate isn't serious, then obviously they won't go forward and to the extent of the process. If for whatever reason they choose to withdraw their candidacy, they can at that time. So that way their information is withheld if they choose to back out. Gives them ample time, because it is a unique situation when you're in a state where there are open meeting laws, because the candidate information is disclosed. And if you're a sitting superintendent, you are absolutely beholden to inform your respective school board, your supervisors, that you intend to apply for this position. Because we have seen it where candidates, for whatever reason, may not have disclosed that information, and that's, that's on them. But it jeopardizes their good standing if they choose not to do that. So there's a number of reasons, and I'm glad that we're discussing this because it's important to know that there's a good time period when this information is presented.
So just again to summarize what Dr. Taylor said so well, the public will have all the same information that the Board of Trustees has when the Board of Trustees has the information. There won't be anything that is withheld from the public that we see and they don't.
That's correct. So when we present the candidate profiles and information, we provide actual artifacts, so tangible documents, whether it's letters of interest, resumes, vitas. Some candidates will submit a 90-day entry plan. They'll have other items, references, academic credentials such as their transcripts. We'll have the thorough background check information. In addition, if you recall during the short interview segment that we had a few weeks ago, I displayed the on-demand interview, the online interview. That's another critical component for us, which is a unique differentiator. You'll have access to their on-demand interviews, which we'll show on these 3 screens here in the boardroom for the community to observe and to get to know the candidates as well.
Great.
So all of that information will be readily available at that time.
Okay. All right. Please continue. Thank you.
All right. Terrific. Great question. All right. So I think, the thing about the particular statement is it boils down to the success of the students. I think ultimately at the end of the day, we care deeply about the outcomes of the students, the academic achievement, whether they pursue post-secondary lives as college students, they go off to serve in the military, they're in a vocational career path, whatever that may be. The success of the students is ultimately what and how we can measure the success of your next superintendent. So the impact we're looking to make is to identify your next leader, your next superintendent of schools who can help with that equitable achievement for all students and all stakeholders concerned. These are just some recent examples of some of our current and former clients. Just wanted to call attention so that way the community has an idea of some of the districts that we serve around the country. One of the things that I noted during the interview is that our executive search practice is not just rooted in superintendent searches. We actually engage in all executive levels ranging from the principalship up to the superintendency and everything in between, from chief academic officers to athletic directors, chief technology officers, general counsel, chief financial officers, all of the above. And not limited to just the traditional K-12 school systems, but also state departments of education. You'll notice that New York State Department of Ed is a client. We've conducted 12 executive level searches for the Department of Education of New York, ranging from deputy commissioner to migrant director, just a variety of different executive level leaders. So our, as I like to say, our tentacles extend very broad and far from the East Coast to the West Coast. So our aim and our goal with your charge is to cast a very wide net and to recruit talent from all over. I alluded to one of the differentiating factors, which is the on-demand interview component, which again adds another layer of transparency for you and those interested in learning more about the executive search process. And a big component of that is this on-demand interview experience, where candidates who meet the minimum qualifications of the job description will be invited to complete the on-demand interview. Now, the questions that we typically ask will be a collaborative exercise where, as a firm, we'll ask what questions are important to you. We have an item bank and a repository of questions, but this, again, is not to replace the in-person interview. This is just a preliminary metric and a screening tool for us to get to know the candidates better. In the event that we don't know the candidates, it gives us an opportunity as well. But we get to see their demeanor, the way they present themselves, the experiences they offer, and ensure that they're meeting at a minimum the qualifications that we're seeking. And then it gives us a chance to identify who we feel are the top 10 before we present the final candidates to you. So that's the interview portal. The experienced practitioners I somewhat alluded to earlier. We have a faculty base of roughly 40 sitting and former superintendents, and including some former school board members who serve on our team to help us with not only recruitment but vetting the candidates. Just this coming weekend, we're actually speaking at a national conference. The National Alliance of Black School Educators is taking place in Dallas, Texas this weekend, and I've been invited to speak to the aspiring cohort by some of our colleagues in this space. Last year it was held in Baltimore. This year I'm grateful that it's in Texas. I don't have to travel too far. But this weekend, that's a conference, and it draws quite the crowd. Last year, I think they had more than 1,000 participants, both sitting superintendents and aspiring superintendents. And I think that gives you a sense of our network. To my knowledge, we're the only search firm in the country that is presenting at this conference. So it gives us a unique opportunity to keep a pulse on talent. Not only sitting superintendents, but ascending superintendents. And also non-traditional talent as well. One of the things that I think we take great pride in is the fact that we have great access to those who are not serving in the practical setting of an educator. Perhaps somebody who has been an educator, whether they were a teacher, a principal, central office administrator, or sitting superintendent, but is now serving in, let's say, some sort of philanthropic role, still in the spirit of education, but has pivoted slightly, and who wishes to return to the seat of a superintendent. So we have access to different sectors, which we'll talk about, and it's very unique to us as well. For those who weren't a part of the interview that I participated in a few weeks ago, this is just a screenshot of what that on-demand portal looks like. So when a candidate logs in, they're invited to complete the online interview, and this is what they see. There's no one on the other end conducting the interview. They do this using their own device, whether it's a laptop, a PC, or a tablet. And they have an opportunity to read the question and then answer the question, and they're typically timed. They're roughly 2 to 3 minutes in duration per question, and then once they're ready to submit, they submit, and then after they complete all 4 questions, as a firm, we are notified that candidate, in this case Dr. Goddard, has submitted his interview, and then we have an opportunity to review the interviews. And my team in the firm is charged with reviewing each of the interviews independently. And you can imagine there's quite a few. We've had no fewer in any superintendent search across the country than 50 candidates apply that meet the minimum qualifications. In this particular district, they had more than 70. So there was quite a few interviews. And so what we do as a team, we watch all of the interviews independently, individually, and then we convene as a team, and we go through our own kind of criteria, who we feel independently are our top 10.
James, can I just stop you there for a second and let Trustee Caudill ask?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So when candidates are doing this online interview experience, are they able to see the question, give an answer, but then I didn't do good enough, and then redo it? Are they able to do that?
Great question. So with this platform, this particular platform is referred to and called Montage Talent, commonly used in the private sector, which I think is a fantastic tool. But to answer your question, yes, they have unlimited retakes, which for us and for me personally, I'll just say this as an I statement, you can tell when a candidate rushes through a question. So if they're not taking the time and giving the attention it deserves, and they're going through it quickly, when they know that they have an opportunity to retake it as many times or redo it as many times as they want, then that's a good opportunity for us to identify their level of attention to detail. So they can take and answer the question as many times until they're satisfied with their response.
So can you see how many takes they essentially took?
We cannot, no.
Okay.
So the final output is only the final submission that we receive. We have no way of, and that's actually not a bad thought. You know, I think that's something we could ask the developers. We actually subscribe to this service. It's a third-party system that we use, and again, to better understand who the candidates are and their levels of experiences. We find it to be a very good resource. And I can tell you, if you were to ask any of the references we provided in our proposal, as far as board references and our board colleagues, one of the things that they've enjoyed the most about working with us is the opportunity to get to know the candidates using this format prior to inviting them in for an in-person interview. Because the old way of reviewing, tangible artifacts such as your letter of interest and resumes. It's hard to ascertain who a candidate really is without really getting to know them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we are doing today, having this dialogue and this two-way conversation. It's good to get a sense of who they are. And that's helpful for us too, because as we are receiving, thousands of applications for the various jobs that we're managing, we won't always know every single candidate. Sometimes they come through us or to us through osmosis, through advertisement. They're not directly recruited, although the lion's share of folks that we recruit and seek out. But some, are a diamond in the rough, and it's good for us to get to know them in another way as well.
I have actually used this in hiring a CEO for a national nonprofit that I was on the board for, and it's very effective. It's really helpful to be able to go beyond the resume and the letter of interest to get an idea about people.
Yeah.
Just chemistry and fit and all those kinds of things. Okay, thank you, James.
Thank you. Any other questions about the on-demand interview experience? No? Okay. All right. And I somewhat jumped the gun earlier and talked a little bit about the recruitment efforts. So I mentioned traditional K-12 leaders, which are those that serve as a teacher, perhaps moved into mid-management, which is the principal role, central office, and then even sitting superintendents. Non-traditional leaders, we've had experience with recruiting chief financial officers, attorneys, those that have a military background, or even those who are in a philanthropic role, or business leaders. There's quite a few executives who lead large, complex systems who have an appetite for this sort of work, and so it's our job and responsibility to at least get to know them a little bit better. And then last but not least, higher ed. We are currently not engaged in any higher ed executive searches, but we do have experience working with higher ed institutions. You saw the picture of Dr. Lenatus on the first screen. She is the reason she's not here today. She is adjunct faculty at our alma mater in Texas and is currently serving on someone's dissertation committee this afternoon, which is why she couldn't be here with TCU there in Fort Worth. So we have various reaches to different higher ed institutions as well, if that's of interest to you and to the community. I spoke a moment ago about NAPSI, and forgive me for the acronyms. I know that we love our acronyms in public education, so I can rattle them all off if you'd like, but these are some of the groups that we have direct ties and connections to. The American Association of School Administrators. One of our current faculty members is Alton Fraley, who was formerly the president of AASA. Pat, who is not here, who is part of the team, is one of the founding members of the Association for Latino Administrators and Superintendents, which is the ALAS acronym that you see there. Our other faculty member serves as the Superintendent's Leadership Academy for ALAS, and his name is Dr. Jose Leyva. He's a former superintendent, retired, and former community college president in Los Angeles. He currently resides in the Phoenix area. And of course, the Council of Great City Schools, which you are a member district. That conference was just held, as you know, in Louisville, Kentucky, where I participated and had a chance to meet with others who are interested, I'll just say, in this particular opportunity during the conference. CUBE, which is an extension of Council and is a part of the larger national cohort. One of our teammates is the president of CUBE currently, Mr. Jacinto Ramos, school board president of Fort Worth ISD. League of Innovative Schools is more of an ed tech entrepreneurial program, if you're not familiar with that group. MASBA is the Mexican American School Board Association, which Mr. Ramos is also the president of. And then NAPSI, where I'm presenting this weekend, is the National Alliance of Black School Educators. So you can see that we have quite a few representatives and a lot of representation with some of the largest national organizations that impact and support the work that we do as educators and serving children across the U.S.
Yes, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam President. What's that last acronym? I was familiar with almost all of the others. NALEL?
The National Association of Latino Elected Officials.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
So-
Yeah. I remember now. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and then, of course, NSBA,
NSBA.
is the National School Board Association.
Isn't CUBE affiliated not with the council but with
But
NSBA?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I misspoke. So you're
Okay.
right. So the correlation is with CUBE is with NSBA.
Okay.
And we have several members that are a part of the CUBE network.
As are
And
we.
Yep.
we are.
As are we.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so this is just a preemptive screenshot of a tentative timeline. I know that we have the intention of identifying a more concrete timeline. And I can tell you, in recent searches and conducting superintendent searches, the average tenure of a superintendent search ranges from 4 to 6 months. I think the interesting side note for this particular search is to take into account the holiday season. So, of course, we want to be mindful of everyone's time off during the holiday season. Of course, looking ahead to Thanksgiving, looking ahead to the Christmas break and the days and times that the schools will be closed. And also be mindful of those who are interested in providing input and feedback to the firm with regard to the characteristics and traits of the next superintendent. Because our intention next is to meet with all those stakeholders that we're charged to visit with to get their candid input. So we want to be mindful of everyone's time. So with that in mind, the planning discussion, which we're engaged in now for the month of November, recruitment is ongoing. We've started that from day one, prior to even the interview, getting a sense of which candidates would be interested in serving in Washoe County School District. So this isn't, again, something that's set in stone, but these are the critical steps. Now, it is, of course, much more robust. This is just a high-level synopsis of the major milestones, these 6 steps that you see before you. But we will get into the granular details of what the timeframes are for each of these critical steps. Any questions with regards to this at a high level at this point?
I just wanted to let my colleagues know that my dear husband has scheduled a trip for us to Europe, April 24th through May 10th, which will probably be a critical time in this schedule, but I absolutely intend to be part of the process and wanted to let folks know that April 24th to May 10th. So thank you, Emily, for making note of that. Yes, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you. I should disclose as well. I don't have a dear husband who planned this trip for me, but I have
He
a dear.
would have for
but
you,
Mike,
too.
I'm sure Mike
He
would have
would
done
have
this
done
had
it
I
for you,
asked.
too.
But this should be early. It's during, at this high level look, is during the screening process. I'll be out of the country as well for a couple of weeks, February 2nd through the 13th.
Okay.
Be in Japan.
Okay. Yeah, and I believe that week, in the second week in February, is also the same time period that AASAs have in their national conference. And I believe this year it's in San Diego. So they actually allow for the search firms to conduct interviews on site. They have a job forum designated each year during their national conference. So depending on when the application opens and the extension of that to when it expires and closes, if it happens to fall during that week, we'll also have an opportunity to recruit during there. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that.
Yes,
Thank you, Madam President. While we're having this conversation, James, at any of those conferences, wearing a hat from back in my athletics days, and when we would be at the NCAA National Conference and would conduct, interviews or have conversations and so on, do you think it would be important, maybe not at the conference that you just mentioned, but maybe at NASB, for an example, or something, to make sure that if any of those opportunities, any of those conferences, would it be important for one of us to be there to answer questions? Or just in your experience, does that add to, does it not matter?
Yeah, I think it never hurts. But again, in the spirit of confidentiality, we want to protect the integrity of the search. So if a candidate is intending to interview, I don't know that it would be in the best interest of the board and the district to interview anyone prior to the scheduled interview time frame and dates. So it never hurts to engage with somebody who might be interested, because if somebody approaches you, I would love to know who those individuals are, so that way we can speak with them, recruit them, and ask them specific questions relating to our screening metrics, and to have them go through the process. Because it is not unlikely for candidates to approach you at conferences. So of course, please, by all means, engage with them in conversation, get to know them better, and if you feel compelled to share that with us and you think he or she might be a good fit potentially, please let us know, because it's our responsibility to screen them and vet them.
Yeah, and certainly my intention was not to say we should be there and conduct interviews or anything
Sure,
like that,
sure.
but just basically what you said, engage in some conversations and maybe even initiate some conversations and have some talks with,
Absolutely.
hey, who's out there who's great, maybe we can answer some questions or anything like that. So
Absolutely.
please let us know if there are opportunities like that when it may be mindful for,
Sure.
I'll volunteer
Yeah.
Katie because Mike won't mind. No, really for someone to attend and
Okay.
something like that. That may.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we welcome the opportunity, and occasionally we'll have socials arranged during some of these national conference where we have it's more of a social environment for us to get to know the candidates, and whether we're breaking bread or if we're just at a conference, it gives us an opportunity to get to know them on a more personal level. What we'll do once those opportunities present themselves, certainly communicate that to Emily and to share that information with General Counsel, so that way that information can be shared to each of you on the board. And if you have plans to attend a conference, that information is readily available to you with the details and the when and where and so forth.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good question.
Okay, keep going.
And we like to share testimonials during our typical presentation. This is one of our colleagues in Texas. She had very, very nice remarks to say about the search, on behalf of the search we conducted for them. And what I'll say at this point, one of the things that we're most proud of, and in fact should be, is that the sitting superintendents that are currently in their roles that we have supported as far as recruitment and have placed in their respective roles are still serving in his or her roles today. As you're probably aware, the national statistic for a sitting superintendent in a district this size is 2.8 years. And for us, we've well exceeded that benchmark and have exceeded that measure of success, which is something we're incredibly proud of. And I think that's a testament to the team and to the work that we do with our district partners and our board colleagues. And what I'd also like to say, and I say this jokingly everywhere, it may sound a little cheesy, but we will never love you and leave you. One of the things that we often provide and offer as an ongoing team for support is just that, whether it be with executive coaching, whether it's board workshops, anything that you feel we could add service or support to with regard to principal development, central office support. There are different functions that we engage in, as I expressed during our interview. The executive search process is just one function, a very important one at that, but the leadership development programs that we offer, executive coaching, advisory work that we do, and the thought leadership partnerships that we have throughout the ed tech community, those are all incredible opportunities for us to give back. And so all to say is that we're here to serve you and to represent you for the long haul, not the short term. I wanted to call attention to just some of the attention that the district is getting through my own personal social media, and this is a screenshot from LinkedIn. I sent this document over last week. We've actually had more hits than this as of today. It only shows the likes, and you can't see the comments, but more than 2,000 views in less than 2 weeks' time. So you have a lot of good press and attention so far, and this is just LinkedIn. This doesn't include our Facebook profiles, our Twitter, and the other social media channels that we use to start marketing the opportunity. And again, this is all preemptive of having a formal application, which is a great testament to the work that the district and you as elected members of the board have engaged in. So it's going to make our jobs easier. So again, thank you for your service, and that is it at a high level for our overview. Any questions, anything that I didn't address that maybe you wanted to ask or you wish you would have heard this afternoon?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're looking forward to the detail. We do have some public comments, so I'll call Mr. Bailey.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We have one very important change to the process that you're going to consider next. Number 10, the development of the new superintendent's compensation package and contract should be first. This is the grand mistake every board of trustees has made before you to their own demise. In this non-transparent process, it's easy for trustees and even the public to fall in love with candidates for superintendent. I've seen it 3 times. You fall in love with them. This creates a negotiating environment that allows the candidate to dictate the terms of the evergreen Christmas tree contracts that have been approved by the school board for the last 10 years. It also created in the mind of every superintendent in the last 10 years that they could literally do anything, okay? And they did. They could do anything they wanted. In the case of Pedro Martinez, that led to an education coup on the civilian authority of this district and the Washoe County School Board. We all know this. Look, don't hurt yourselves. Don't. Change the process. Move number 10, the development of the superintendent's compensation contract and package, to number 1. The second change, to comply with the open meeting law, the public should be allowed to see every application that's submitted to Washoe County School District for the position. The real value of the contract with the consulting firm here is the pool of candidates. How big is the pool? Let me give you an example. If it's $30,000 for the contract and they only tell us about the top 10, but there's only 11 candidates in the pool, that's a cost of $2,727 per candidate. On the other hand, if they get 50 candidates, as they've said they have in previous searches, that's only $600 per candidate. So this is a dollar and cents question. I think we should be allowed to see every application that comes through and know the number of applications that come through. The public must know the efficiency of the tax dollars at work in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Please go ahead.
All right. So I think as far as the overview has concluded. I think what would be important at this time is to identify some timeline measurables. The next step would be to engage in the community stakeholder meetings. So there are some specific deliverables and action items on the firm's end to engage with all stakeholders, whether it be at a macro level, micro level, individuals, student groups, everyone who is interested in providing input and feedback we'd like to visit with. So whatever that time frame looks like in your eyes and in your minds, ideally we'd like to conduct these meetings prior to the new year if possible. Mm-hmm. But again, my statement earlier, being mindful of the holidays, we want to respect the travel season and understand that Thanksgiving is around the corner. You have the Christmas holidays and whatever religious affiliation you observe. We want to be mindful of all of that. So as a board, has there been any discussion with regard to potential time frames for us to engage with the community? Because we could make suggestions, but I don't want to make assumptions either.
I'll just update you. The board has not talked about timeline. Okay. I think we did have a fairly robust discussion about the desire to have a very inclusive and full comprehensive process for stakeholder engagement. Nathan, did you want to speak?
Yes, Mr. Guerra. So I am the representative for an organization known as the Student Advisory Council to the school district. And so that you don't just get my voice, but also the voices of many other students, I'd like to invite you to our next meeting on November the 19th to come and conduct a miniature stockholder meeting. Just determine whether or not further meetings need to take place and get initial input.
Okay.
All right.
He might have to do that remotely. But perhaps there would be a way to have someone do a phone call or something else with our student advisory council.
It's possible, and I believe. Let me pull up a calendar. That's a Wednesday.
It's a week from today.
Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would think that we want And if that doesn't happen at that point, that's one of the groups that, in my mind, I'm thinking the Student Advisory Council is one of the groups that we want to include.
Absolutely.
As we have that, and I know that's further in the on the agenda. Here are the groups we want to make sure that the search firm engages with in terms of those desires and other voices and so on. So if it doesn't, work so that you can actually attend the meeting, at this point, that will happen, because I agree. I think the more student voice, the better.
Absolutely.
In something like this. So one way or another, I think we can certainly get that covered.
Is it feasible, based on your knowledge of the various stakeholder groups and potential stakeholder groups, to conduct these meetings prior to the new year? Or is that too aggressive? Again, I don't want to make assumptions, but we'll make every effort to do that prior to January 1.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Vice President Raymond?
I was just going to say, in terms of the timeline, I think we should go for it. I know there is a lot of talk about how we're all so busy during that time, but I think often other things kind of fall off to the side, and I do think this is a priority, and so I think if we can try to convene as many stakeholder groups as possible, and perhaps if there's a really critical group that just can't fit into that time frame, it spills over a little bit, but I think it seems to me
I can share a
possible.
hypothetical with you and give you a recent experience. So in common practices, the three of us, myself and my two colleagues, will work in the community, let's say, for 4 to 5 days on site, actual boots on the ground. We may have to, as we like to say, divide and conquer, because there will be several meetings being held simultaneously throughout the district, throughout the community, whether it's student groups, whether it's PTA groups, Chamber of Commerce, different clergy, men and women, all of the above. So again, want to have everyone, we want to give everyone the opportunity to share their voice and let their voices be heard. So we'll make every effort to meet with as many groups as possible. In the recent example that I'm referring to, we had no less than 20 group meetings during the course of 3 consecutive days. And keep in mind, that was a much smaller community, a much smaller district. So we could have many more than that, which is why I want to be mindful of the time. We're dedicated, and we'll be here as long as it takes, and we'll make every effort to accomplish our goal before January 1. So what we could do, we have a pretty robust list that we're starting to compile now based on the various meetings we've had with different stakeholder groups, both individual and large groups, town hall meetings, so forth. And not to mention the online survey that will be posted on the district's homepage. And one thing to consider is that the survey tool that we use, we can utilize any language of your preference. It doesn't have to be limited to just English. A recent search that we did, we had a secondary survey that was conducted in Cantonese. So depending on what you feel is necessary and important, we can have multiple surveys running simultaneously. And that data and that feedback is in real time. So again, with the summative reports that we provide for your understanding and your reference, will be distributed through the survey. All of that work is done simultaneously. Yes,
James,
ma'am.
just a couple questions. We also want to be mindful of the input of our employees, and so making sure that we can schedule it so that employees can have an opportunity to weigh in is certainly really important, whether it's after school, after work, whatever. And I also wanted to ask your experience with diverse stakeholder groups versus sort of homogeneous stakeholder groups. Because sometimes I have found in doing focus groups for other processes I've been involved in, that having voices from multiple groups actually makes the discussion very rich, rather than just having people from one same group. Perhaps mixing folks from a minority community with PTO. Sometimes it creates a lot of dialogue that people wouldn't have otherwise have thought of. And I just wondered what your experience and your preferences in those
Absolutely.
groups.
No, I think we would prefer to have a diverse mix, because you get to have those rich conversations and there's honest dialogue. People tend to not hold back in these meetings, and that's what we welcome. We want to have give them the platform and the stage to share their input, their feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. You know, it's important for us to hear it all. So at all levels, and you're spot on. Internally, the staff, whether it's all staff. So we typically break groups up into, depending on interest, it could be a group of principals, it could be your executive cabinet, it could be auxiliary staff, central office staff, school-based staff. Again, we spend an exhaustive amount of time on grounds here locally, meeting with as many people as we possibly can.
Okay.
So I would assume that there's going to be a high interest in this work, and that folks will take the opportunity and jump at the opportunity to visit with us.
Great.
And we'll contact them directly with the help of Emily, of course, and her wonderful staff. But we'll take the charge of reaching out to everyone to schedule that, put a schedule together that'll be available. Again, in the spirit of transparency, through the district's homepage is typically how we do that.
Okay, just a couple things. I'm watching the clock, and we're
Okay.
now almost at 3 o'clock,
Sure,
so we only
sure.
have one more hour before we start our regular meeting, so we have a lot to get through.
Sure.
I wanted to also, call on Dr. Taylor, but also ask General Counsel to weigh in. My sense is that we probably, I wanted to talk about whether trustees are present at those stakeholder group meetings or not. But Dr. Taylor, why don't you ask your question? We can think
just
about
if I
that.
may, because it's connected to
Yeah, please,
the
go
previous,
ahead.
but I think that's what you're asking. I think is really good because we would want to know.
Yeah.
I would think. I'm thinking about the diversity within the groups, and I do think that can garner some rich conversation. However, also know that in some groups, people aren't going to be honest unless they have a high level of safety, right? And there's a high level of safety when especially if your voice may be a voice that is that you feel like it's not heard often, right? It's a little easier sometimes to come forward and be open with it. So there's a unique balance. I think I would ask if you, and this is what you do, you and your team, there's a balance there I would want to create, because we also don't want someone to not feel comfortable coming forward with a concern, especially if they've had an issue or whatever that case, or if they aren't used to sharing that voice or anything like that. So I don't know what I would advise one versus the other, but I think it is really important to make sure that we create a safe environment so that people, especially those that may come forward that who feels like their voice isn't ordinarily heard,
Absolutely.
a safe place for them to be able to do that as well.
Good point.
Yeah, I think there's both ends of the spectrum, and we try to remain neutral, right, and behave agnostically through this process. So that way, those who feel more comfortable in a safe space to share their input and provide their feedback, we'll give everyone the opportunity. So there will be ample platforms for individuals, whether it's through the anonymous survey online or just with us privately. And sometimes we go to these particular individuals or particular groups, so that way they feel comfortable in their own environments.
Okay, good.
So we do all of that. So it's not them just coming to us. We go to them, so that way they feel protected in their environment.
Are you going to come back to us and double check, here's the list of stakeholder groups that we're going to, okay, good.
That's correct.
Okay.
So right now,
Yes is good. I'm trying to move it along.
yeah. Yes is good. Yes is good. Absolutely.
Neil, just on trustee attendance at those various groups.
Yeah, so I don't, it's, from a legal perspective, as long as we don't have a quorum, you're okay. And I think there's some practical things that you need to think about, such as the chilling effect on those who might want to talk, but that's up to you to decide. I think the other thing to think about is, you know, who's going to go to which ones, and that's something as the president that I think you can, and really you guys could all work it out here in an open meeting. I'm going to attend. You know, Trustee Cottle might be like, I want to go to my area, so I'm going to attend those out there by way of example.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. You just really, really need to avoid going to those and then coming back and sending emails to the entire board of trustees or something on those lines, which would invoke the open meeing law.
Great,
So that's
okay.
the real thing to be careful
So
of.
everybody needs to be very, very careful about that it not become deliberation, and that, and I would say maybe Emily, or I don't know, somebody on our staff needs to be the point of contact for us to say, I want to go to this meeting, and make sure that we don't have quorums, and that we don't share any deliberation with other trustees following our attendance at those meetings. Fine to say I was there, but not to,
That's accurate.
yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, so at a high level, just to recap, we'll provide a comprehensive list of all of the individuals, both macro, micro levels of stakeholder groups. If we happen to miss anyone, please, weigh in and let us know where we have any gaps. And then that will include the dates of these meetings, so that way we can all plan accordingly.
Okay.
So that's the next major, I guess, step in the process.
And one thing I want to clarify with staff, we should probably schedule on every upcoming board agenda a possible update on the superintendent search so that we have the ability to make decisions, for example, on a stakeholder group list. Okay, Vice President Raymond?
And I'll just add, I think, Emily obviously is aware of this, and I spoke with James this morning about it, but I hope that the community communications department, and I know you said you would work with them closely, because I think they know so many of the stakeholders in the community, but they also have a good sense of times that have worked for us in the past and some of those other ways to engage different types of community groups in different areas of the community. So I know that was part of the plan, but just stating it again.
Absolutely. We plan to meet tomorrow and discuss this particular topic. All right, so that's the next major milestone in the process, identifying the dates and the stakeholder groups prior to the new year. The follow-up to that, again, in the spirit of heading in this direction, is to start crafting with the board and with the team the job profile and the application packet for public consumption for those who wish to apply. So
Can we back up just a moment? So I
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
make sure we've kind of looked at item 2, which had to do with stakeholder, but I want to make sure we talk about the use of potentially a group to advise the consultant, how that might work. And we do have some public comment. I checked with council, because we've opened all of these items, it does allow for an atypical amount of public comment. I do want to caution folks in public comment that this is a discussion of the board. It's not for us to have a discussion with people who are here in public, but we will listen to the public comment. But I just want to caution, we don't want to get into a back and forth on the public. So, JJ, when did you call public comment?
Jeff Church.
Hello, folks. Jeff Church. Please don't kill the messenger. But I recently applied for a board with the city of Reno, and instantly they warned me that my application could be public. We're not talking open meeting law. We're talking Nevada Revised Statute 239, public document. So talk to your attorney, but I have it here. A public document is anything that's submitted that's not declared confidential in nature. So unless it's declared confidential, it is a public document. So if somebody emails somebody, in my limited opinion, and says, hey, the superintendent, Mary Smith from Houston, just applied, that email could become a public document, so be aware of that. And I'd kind of welcome opinion from your advisor here, your researcher, or recruiter rather, but my personal opinion, the budget for the Washoe County School District is approximately $800 million. That's the largest budget in Nevada outside of Clark County, bigger than Reno, Sparks, et cetera. So what I'm saying is I think that any applicant for the position, one of the primary things you would want to look at would be a background in fiscal management, budgeting, MBA, et cetera. A superintendent who's a former teacher or principal, that sounds wonderful, but not necessarily the best person to be the superintendent. That might be the number 2 position, assistant superintendent for education. But once again, if we don't have a good budget, then you don't have good teachers, you can't hire enough teachers, you have overcrowding, et cetera, et cetera. And perhaps the best example is our last superintendent had a background in education, but we had a terrible budget problem. And our ACT scores, by the way, fell in the last couple of years, I think from 18.2 down to 17.9. But the last I see shaking heads, it was in the news, I have it on, I can bring it up, 17.9 is the Washoe County School District ACT score for the last year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And that's why we have a search consultant, is so those things don't come to the trustees. Those applications go to the search consultant. So we won't see them, and they won't be a matter of public record. Okay, go ahead.
Todd Bailey.
Madam President, we would like to request that the trustees direct staff to make an extra effort to arrange community engagement in the search for a new superintendent with the following community stakeholders: special education parents and students, homeless parents and students, teachers and support staff at underperforming schools. These community stakeholders have a special place above all others in this district, and that is because the Office of Accountability has clearly identified these stakeholders as the one set of stakeholders who have not benefited from all the new tax money or efforts this district has made. We just saw in September a report from the Accountability Office, and they did acknowledge that these were the groups that have been left behind. These are the groups who have not increased graduation rates. In fact, they've fallen behind. So one more time, please direct staff to make an extra effort to arrange community engagement in the search for a new superintendent of Washoe County School District with special education parents and students, homeless parents and students, and the teachers and support staff at underperforming schools. These are the people that the new superintendent must pay the most attention to, because these are the stakeholders and community groups that have been left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. And I do believe all of those groups have already been provided to Mr. Guerra as ideal stakeholder groups. I do want to correct the record that we do have graduation rate increases among our children with disabilities, among our children in transition, which is our homeless population. So I do want to correct the record there. We have increased graduation rates for them. Okay, we have a lot to do, and we have 51 minutes. Okay. Can we talk now about the use of a stakeholder group that would advise the consultant on helping to narrow the field, if you will? Again, we want to make sure that we are including the community in the process, that we're giving the opportunity to have more than just the consultant winnow the applications and bring us a field of candidates, and be able to address that field of candidates that we see as the most likely to be done all of that in public. Just wanted to see what board members' thoughts are on that. Anybody have any comments?
I just want to,
Dr. Taylor?
Thank you, Madam President. Just for clarity, so this is really our considering, should we have a community group, if you will, to act as advisory to the search firm?
Correct. Yeah, and I don't. When I say community, it doesn't necessarily mean external.
Right. It could include
ideally
teachers,
could
staff, and so on. Sure, students. You bet.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what you were asking.
That's sort of the thought.
Okay.
Vice President Raymond.
Well, I would just be curious to, I guess, understand. I know that Nevada is unique with our open meeting law, but if there are other scenarios that you've seen work in other districts, what your thoughts might be as the consultant.
Yeah, I think in full disclosure, there's two trains of thought, right? Due to the confidentiality and preserving the integrity of a search, it's important to protect the confidentiality of the candidates. So having an external group is a viable option, or a subcommittee, if you will, who will help us and work directly with us, is a viable asset and a resource, with the understanding that they each understand the importance of confidentiality. What I will encourage, what we do in other states where it's not open meetings, where there aren't open meeting requirements, is we'll have each member sign a confidentiality oath. So we will hold them accountable to the confidentiality oath that we engender as our standard practice. I know that doesn't pertain to you, but this group, my understanding, will be working directly with us. So you're not being directed necessarily by this particular group. It's them giving us advice, giving us direction and input. So it won't impact your role as elected members of the board, but add an additional layer of input and feedback. And again, in the spirit of transparency, have that level of involvement. So it's not, I think there isn't necessarily a better way of doing it or a worse way, if that makes sense. So it couldn't hurt, it could help. And I think for us, what would be helpful is to understand who those individuals are. So we would seek your input on potential subcommittee members, whether they're internal and or external. Student groups, of course, would be a welcomed asset to that particular committee. But whoever those individuals are, I think it's important to have a controlled group of people, whatever that number may be.
It's almost like having an assessment panel that, these folks would be viewing the information, they would be viewing the online interviews. Vice President Raymond?
So would they help us get, in your earlier reference, from B to A or A to B? I forget
Correct,
which
yeah.
one was which.
Yeah, so I think they would help us and provide input based on what he or she in their respective group, the group knows about this community and the district and what's needed in the next superintendent, because that is invaluable. The local representation is certainly helpful, and I think as elected members of the board, having that level of input and feedback from this subcommittee that's giving us advice and helping us with the process in its entirety is good for transparency's sake. And I also think, too, it helps bridge any gaps between the district and the community, whether there's, if gaps exist, the subcommittees could certainly help in that.
Yeah, I see a lot of benefit in having the support, and I think it seems to me it would help keep the process moving a little more swiftly than if that everything was going through us. So I like that idea.
Yeah, and there's a way, I think the control factors as a part of this are what I think are important, again, because we want to respect the confidentiality. So I think in all cases being considered, whether it is a process managed by us and with the board, or with the subcommittee, the board, and with us, the spirit of confidentiality is always important. I mean, this is not a risk-averse by any means effort, but we want to ensure that candidate information isn't leaked prematurely, and we'll take ownership of protecting the confidentiality, which is why I bring up the confidentiality oath, which is something that's very important to us, and that's something that we utilize in other states where we do not have open meeting laws.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree. The only downside to it, in my mind, is just to make sure that confidentiality is maintained, so that isn't violated in terms of the integrity of the search. I think there are a lot of benefits from it that we can gain, because that just gets the community more involved in the process, and I think that's a positive thing. Quite frankly. I also think that we want to be careful and don't call it a subcommittee of the board, because then we start running into open meeting law.
That's right.
I think we should be clear in outlining here are the responsibilities, so that is really straightforward for the community as well as for those that may be involved in that committee. And then I also think we want to have a good discussion on the selection of those folks and what that might look like, who gets to be, so to speak, on that.
Well, again, the board would not be selecting those folks, because if we select them, then they're advisory to the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a really fine line, but the manual talks about, the open meeting law manual talks about that if the board, in effect, appoints the people, that it's a subcommittee, has to comply with the open meeting law, and then we run into.
Well, yeah, we don't want to get into that. So, okay, so perhaps, so maybe the selection isn't our selection, but still, how they're selected is still going to be really important, because I think there are many people that would like the opportunity to get involved. But of course, we don't want a group, an advisory group, let's call them, instead of a subcommittee. We don't want an advisory group that has 50 people on it.
That's right.
So then that becomes unwieldy. And I think it's also really important that we consider diversity in a lot of different ways. In that, in their roles and their backgrounds and where they live, all of that, which is a lot. But I think it really has to be representative of the students. Not the community as much, but as the group that we serve.
That's correct. Yeah, I think there needs to be clear expectations set up front, deliberate expectations, and us having honest conversations with them and what our expectations are during the tenure of this process, because there's a lot of sweat equity that will go into the recruitment of talented individuals to serve here as your next superintendent. And the last thing we want to happen is somebody's information to be leaked prematurely, which is why we will be very, I'll just use the word blunt, with each of the advisory committee members, whomever they may be, so that they understand that this is a very important job. And it is still, at the end of the day, the function of the school board to hire the next superintendent. So this is not to replace you as elected members, because this is your job. In fact, we do not participate in the actual in-person interviews. That's something that we will be here on site to support, but it is your sole responsibility.
And again, the reason for this is for us to have the widest possible net of the best possible candidates. And we want to do those things that are compliant with our obligation as elected officials to the open meeting law in Nevada. And we also want to be respectful of the people who might want to apply here, that, as you've said, there are cases where people have lost their jobs because their information has been prematurely leaked, and that's a negative that we would not want to have that outcome for anybody. We want this to be a respectful process for everybody. Trustee Cottle, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, this is a clarification. Are we able to direct staff to form a committee if we can't do it ourselves? Because we obviously can't direct a superintendent in this case.
We can direct our consultant through this action today.
To create a committee?
Probably not calling it a committee just so we don't run afoul, but an advisory group. Yeah, a search advisory group, superintendent search advisory group.
Okay.
I believe that is, yeah, okay. That's why it's on the agenda, so we can take that action if we choose to.
I can even suggest that you can say not who's particularly, but
groups.
What groups you would like to be on there. Business, chamber of, for example, Chamber of Commerce, things like that. And then it'll be up to the consultant and our support to figure that out after that.
Have some sort of application process. Just, yeah, that they'll figure that out. But that would be, and we would want to, I guess, at the culmination of this discussion, we need to have an action to describe that, a motion to take that action. Does that work for you, Trustee Cottle? Okay.
President Simon Holland,
Yes.
One thing that I'd like to add, and I'd just like to circle back to what Angie said, because I think that brought a ton of clarity to the conversation, right? This group serving in an advisory capacity to the consultant really makes sure that the initial stakeholder feedback that's gathered to then create the profile, that involvement and that community input continues through the rest of the process as candidates are being vetted. And most importantly, this advisory function does not allow the board to be privy before the public is privy to information, right? It's an advisory function for the consultant, not replacing the board's responsibility or decision-making capacity. So I think that's important to note.
Good. Okay. So let's keep moving on getting through our agenda. So we've talked about stakeholder groups. You're going to bring back a list to us. You've talked about town hall meeting surveys, community input group. Timeline for search process activities is still a little bit uncertain, but the most important piece we have is a goal to have the stakeholder input completed before the first of the year.
That's correct.
Not hard and fast, because if we've missed anybody, we're not going to shut the door on important input, but that would be a goal. Okay. Scheduling of subsequent work sessions to finalize the superintendent job description and compensation range. I don't know if are we ready to have that conversation?
I think it's too early. We typically engage in that discussion as we get closer to naming or considering the lone finalist. And let's just say hypothetically they're the top three, and identifying what that looks like. But what we could offer, and what we also do as a supplement or a complement to our service, is we provide you as a board a comparative analysis of salaries if we're looking at sitting superintendents or even aspiring superintendents from across the United States. So you have a landscape of data to glean from.
I want to interject here. We went through a revising of our superintendent's contract. Dr. Taylor and I were the primary representatives of the board in doing that. We did an exhaustive review of salaries nationally. We did an exhaustive review of comparative benefits within our Truckee Meadows region for public sector leaders. And I want to throw out to the trustees that perhaps a future action item for us is to discuss whether we might just use that as here is the compensation package that we offer. We were able to negotiate a significant reduction in what the previous compensation package was by $100,000 or more. So, but maybe we can put that on a future agenda.
And what I could offer now, I'm sorry, General Counsel.
Go ahead, Neil.
In anticipation of that, I met with the HR director, our labor attorney, as well as Mark Mathers from Finance, and we have, pursuant to our authority in the Office of General Counsel, we're going to hire someone and propose to you that we come to you with a contract.
Okay.
Not with the salary, but here's our contract. So this way, when applicants come forward, they know what they're getting into. And we won't have these big, and it will contain much of what you already had. But I talked to an outside firm, and there's still some things that they would like to add in.
Okay.
So,
And ranges have changed a bit since then.
Sure.
Okay, so you're already scheduling that to come back.
Yeah.
But I would encourage fellow trustees, my hope is that we have a contract for compensation that we say, here it is.
Okay.
Before we get
Sure.
there, and here's what the job description is before we get there.
Right, and I'd like to clarify too, and I appreciate that we're discussing this now. So a common practice is to have a minimum, a median, and a high, right? You have a range.
A range.
And the rule of thumb is nationally for superintendents, if you think of, let's just say the base is, and I'm just using this as a raw number, so please don't put a stake in the ground. If the base is $250,000, the incentives and benefits that accompany that base salary are typically roughly 20%. If you were to look at the national landscape, just to give you food for thought as you're thinking about this. But we do have other examples and templates that we can glean from, that we can provide as a repository for consideration with existing contracts and former contracts.
We'll let
Yeah.
staff work with you on that,
Sure.
but the intent would be, we're not doing this when we have 3 finalists. We're doing this
Sure.
before we actually release the application.
And that was my misunderstanding. What I was hearing, and this is my misunderstanding, is that part of the negotiation. But if we have an idea, even better for us, because we can disclose that
Right.
in advance of the recruitment, so that way
Okay.
when candidates ask, we have that information readily available. So
Okay.
that will be very helpful to us.
Okay. And then we do need to have a superintendent job description brought back for review. So Emily, maybe you can put that on your list for, I don't know that it needs to be a work session, but I'd open that up for discussion.
I think
Right.
sorry, go
So
ahead.
just if I may, just if there's anything that something that I guess would be helpful is if we have some comparison information. Just as we're doing in the compensation package, and I know that's the work that an attorney as a general counsel is talking about. Then I think just some so that we can have a basis of what else is out there. Obviously. President Simon Holland and I worked on it, and we thought we did a good job, but it just could be us.
It can be better. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can always be better. Maybe there are some things that we missed, or maybe some things that are included that shouldn't. So I think some job description information, some other information would be helpful. I don't know if it needs to be a work session either, but I think I would like for that to accompany it if it comes back. If there are, things that that you can find out there that's okay, best practices and whatnot.
Yeah, I think using the current job description as a starting point, also looking at some other examples from within this space, and then I think most importantly, the work that James does in gathering the stakeholder feedback about what we're looking for. The job description should be aligned to that. So once we have that information synthesized, I can absolutely bring an item back to review the job description.
So it sounds like we will have future items for a job description, for compensation contract, and potentially for approval of a stakeholder list and a survey question list. Is that?
That's correct. So the first or the next milestone will be this comprehensive stakeholder list, including the online survey questions.
Okay.
When we can conclude all of the stakeholder group meetings and have an opportunity to synthesize and aggregate the data from the online survey, our typical and standard practice is to provide you with a summative report and a comprehensive report of what we've heard from the community groups and what we've gathered from the online survey. And to Emily's point, that serves as a catalyst to create and drive the job description and the job profile.
Okay.
So we'll have a tentative draft of a job profile. Typically that's done, of course, and open for your approval, and then you have an opportunity to suggest revisions or any amendments to the job profile.
Okay.
An application, but we certainly, that's in the spirit of these stakeholder group meetings, it drives us to the job profile and the job description, because we'll incorporate everyone's voice in a manner that's conducive.
Okay. I'm trying to move us along because it's now 3:30. Sir?
Create a record on something.
Okay.
So just to be clear, so that the board understands, pursuant to our board policy 9165, we're allowed to hire outside counsel. And I felt it was important to hire outside counsel in this regard because I'm going to work for the person who comes here. So I don't, and Emily agreed, and so did Mark Mathers, and it's a very minimal cost. So I just want to let the community, I know the board understands, but I think it's important to let the community know why we made that call to do it that way.
Okay. Let's move on to 2.03, if we can. And I know we've opened all of them, but let's move on to that subject. We do have some public comment on 2.03, that topic.
Todd Bailey.
Briefly, Madam President, through you to the legal counsel and HR, thank you very much. It sounds like number 10 has been already moved up to number 1, and I think it's a great idea. I also want to acknowledge the work that both you, Madam President, and Trustee Taylor did do on that contract, and it was a huge improvement. As you know, those previous contracts were trash for the taxpayer, and you guys did some good work on that. So I think that's a great idea. I also think it's important to acknowledge that the consultant just said that anybody who's interested in looking at the pool of candidates and validating that simply needs to sign a non-disclosure agreement and swear secrecy, which I'm more than willing to do, simply to validate the candidate pool. He did say that if there is going to be an advisory group that looks at those applications, they will need to sign a confidentiality agreement if they're going to do, and I'm willing to do that simply to validate the number of people in the pool of candidates. We'd also like to request the trustees make the following characteristics of the next superintendent a priority: a history of loyalty. 2-point-something years isn't long enough to get the job done, so we're looking for loyalty. A history of credibility and integrity. If you think about the previous superintendents we've had, this is an area they need some improvement in. No history of broad scholarship or broad behavior, and we've all had a discussion about that. Look, if you're a candidate for the superintendent's job at Washoe County School District, let me share with you the magic words. Quote, I am here to take Washoe County School District in a fresh, new direction, building on the accomplishments the district has already achieved, unquote. Substantiate it, bring it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Okay, so let's move into a discussion of characteristics, skills, and experience. And I know, I'm sure everybody has had some time to think about that, so I just open it up to trustees. Mr. Kelly, and thank you for getting here. I know you had another meeting, so we appreciate your effort to be here.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll just kick it off by saying I think something important would be prior experience managing a large organization, whether education or non-education, but just a large education comparable to our school district size.
Good. Okay. Others? Dr. Taylor?
A couple of comments. I think there are a lot of characteristics and skills that I know that we can list, and some will be demonstrated in the job description or the job announcement, I guess, if whichever way you want to indicate. I think there are couples. Whatever of those that we agree upon, I would like for there to be a demonstrated history, so that we can see that it isn't just, do you have integrity? Yes, I do. Right? So some way to have a demonstration, right, of that, so that those things that we deem are really important, that we have some way of some kind of verification of that. I think certainly for me, one of those things would be I'd like to know their experience in working in a diverse and more diverse growing district, if you will. We are, as we all know, we are a majority minority district. And that can create its own challenges, you know, and that isn't just ethnically, but we have, I don't know what, almost 100 different languages in this district, and we know we have a homeless population in this district, we have a high special ed population in this district, and we have a home poverty population in this district, and all of those creates different challenges. So to see that their experiences, to be able to demonstrate that they've had a commitment to it, and then two, some kind of demonstrated success in that area. In those areas. Thank you.
Others? Let's keep going. Vice President Raymond.
I agree with both those. Those are on my list. And then I would add communication. Not just that they're a good communicator, but their ability to communicate to varying audiences, I think, in effective ways, and to build consensus. I think we need someone that has, and again, a demonstrated record of doing so in other arenas, but I think, you know, just with the different stakeholder groups that we have, that those exist out in all of our schools and all of our employee groups, and so it's not just about the community, it's about the internal communication as well. So.
Okay, others? Trustee Caudill.
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I would like to add somebody that is going to build relationships in our community, and also someone who is comfortable being the face of our district, comfortable getting out in front of the media talking about our school district, both in the good times and the bad times. And then that will continue to build trust. So this individual has to be comfortable being the face, and that's not for everyone. So how we determine that is yet to be seen, but that's, I think, very important for this next individual.
Trustee Minetto.
And I so agree with you all. The listening ears are really important to me, that they're hearing what the teachers are saying. The teachers are the ones doing the job as such. And what they do is the big thing. And I think that because they're the ones with the children, and they're the ones who are going to help the children bloom. So, yeah, I think just listening ears. I think that you said that.
Good. Trustee Calvert or Trustee Noble? Student Trustee Noble?
Yes, just based on the limited amount that I've been able to speak with my peers about this, two things that they do care about very deeply in an upcoming superintendent candidate is a certain accountability that they will have to stakeholder groups in the community throughout their run as superintendent, kind of what Trustee Minetto said about listening ears, and not just being willing to listen, but also to take different suggestions into account. And the other factor that they prized very highly was not just a willingness to engage with the community, but some knowledge of what our community is, some idea of who we are and what our demographics look like, and just generally what is necessary to make our school district in particular run.
Great. Okay. Trustee Calvert, anything you want to add?
I just kind of want to piggyback on what he said, because I think that's really important that whoever we get, they do need to be familiar with what's going on in our community. And I do believe a lot of times we've brought in people here that have no clue, they're clueless, and so our kids are the ones that suffer. So for me, that would be the biggie, is someone that, number one, they care about our children in our schools, and that they care about listening and doing the right thing for everyone in the school district.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I want to add, just building on things my colleagues have said, I appreciate what Trustee Kelly led with, which is the sort of the executive leadership, the management experience, because we are almost $1 billion enterprise, 5 labor associations, 8,000 employees, largest employer in Northern Nevada. So it is important that we have somebody who has that track record of executive leadership results. I'd also just build on things that have been said, you know, a passion for student outcomes, really a passion for students, and a passion for the community and for our employees. Somebody who is really will be seen by our employees as a champion and a leader, somebody who's collaborative and a team player. And I'm really hopeful of finding somebody that has some big vision, because we have a big job to do with our 64,000 students going into the jobs that they will need to be prepared for. So that's important to me. And then Trustee Taylor.
Thank you. I was just going to add an emphasis on the leadership piece,
Mm-hmm.
and you've shared that, so I'm good. Thank you. I forgot to mention that on my list. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Kelly.
Thank you, Madam President. And I would think maybe adding something along the lines of experience working with lawmakers, whether state or local or higher, but just the ability to advocate for our school district with lawmakers, especially during the legislative sessions.
Mm-hmm. Good. Good. We've talked about communication skills. We've talked about being the face of the organization in the community, and really being willing to be out in the world that we're serving, be out with families, be out with, in the neighborhoods, listening to the folks who are living the challenges that our children are facing, the trauma, the poverty, as Trustee Taylor said. Trustee Cotto?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what you had said about vision. I think right now there's a nervousness in our school district to think big, and so I would like to see someone that comes in with big plans, a path to achieve those big plans, and then go achieve them and not be afraid, because you're not going to achieve anything unless you go for it. If you're afraid to go for it, you're not going to get there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is very, very important in this person. This person needs to have vision for our district.
I also added to my list somebody who can be a stabilizing force as well, because we do want to grow, we want to build on the success we have, but we also want to create that stable environment for our employees and for the community. Okay, good list. Anything else anybody wants to add at this moment? And I know that certainly James is willing to be texted and called at home, and Vice President Raymond.
I'm sort of going off of President Simon Holland, and a little bit, I don't see it as opposed to the go big and come in, but I also think that we have an opportunity to really evaluate what we're doing now, and it's not that I don't think you necessarily intended that someone come in with a bunch of new big ideas that we're not already doing, but what are we doing now that's working, and how do we grow that and make that more successful? Because, we don't want to bring somebody in with a bunch of new programs, new ideas, new things to add to what we're already doing if they're not necessarily needed. I think it's that kind of person who can look at what's working and see, where do we want to continue to proceed with programs, but maybe there's areas where we really could cut back, and I agree that they need to come in with the plan to how to do that and to start, that process immediately. So.
Take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may,
Dr. Taylor?
just believe it or not, Mr. Bailey, I think he had it right to build upon the things that we're doing well, and then to take us forward. I think that was a great statement. A great statement.
Good. Okay. What I'd like to have is a motion that would provide the direction that we have given today, including the timeline, the stakeholder input group discussion we've had. What else do I need to have in there, Counselor? Things that will come back.
Things that would come back, the characteristics. Did you say that?
I think well, that's part of what this has been in terms of just direction, so we're not going to say them all over again.
No, I don't think you need to say them all over again, but just we expect you to go and find folks with those characteristics.
Okay,
as we thought,
good.
That type of thing.
Okay, Dr. Taylor, I'm counting on you for a motion.
I was counting on Trustee Kelly.
Do you want it?
No, Trustee Kelly is good at go, please.
All right, Trustee Kelly.
Now, quick question, Madam President. Do you
Yes.
want a couple motions, or do you think one overall?
I'd like to have one and just sort of encompassing, if that's all right.
Okay, so I'll give it a shot.
Thank you.
I move that the board direct staff and JG Consulting to, 1, create a superintendent search consulting group comprised of local stakeholders to advise Washoe County School District and JG Consulting throughout the search process.
Actually, just the consultant. Just the consultant, yeah.
Okay. So noted. And
Yep.
then to bring back a list of attributes that we would like to see in the next superintendent, to firm up the timeline. And am I missing anything?
Bringing back an agenda item for a superintendent job description, adoption of the survey questions, and the stakeholder list. I also had those.
Yes.
And then a future action on a contract for compensation. Those would come back.
So I'll accept those friendly amendments, and I will ask JJ maybe to reread when you have a chance.
Do we have a second?
Oh, Trustee Cottle beat you. Okay.
So the motion is to provide direction to staff to bring
And JG Consulting.
and JG Consulting related to the timeline, stakeholder list, survey questions, job descriptions, consultant advisory group, and compensation contract.
Did we get the survey questions, stakeholder list, compensation contract, characteristics? Okay, I think we got it.
Would job description include the
The
characteristics?
superintendent job description. Probably those are different things. Yeah.
And
Okay.
characteristics.
Okay, and we have a second. Okay. Is there any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Okay. We still need to take action on Exhibit A, which is 2.04. I don't know that anything needs to be, is there anything that you all think needs to be revised in the Exhibit A of the scope of work for the consultant? I didn't see anything that needs to be revised.
Is it in chronological order necessarily?
I would say not in chronological order.
Okay.
It's not a sequence.
No, but it's samples. So yeah, so everything is proposed as like a sample timeline or tentative time frame. So
It just has number 10, and if in the process, if we are moving that up, to slot it in at the
Yeah.
right place.
Yeah, okay.
I think the other thing to consider is that when we sit down to do the follow-up on some of these items, if we find that there's anything glaring that needs to be revised, we can make the revision and submit that on consent to a future agenda
Okay,
item.
good,
so.
good. Okay, so
yeah,
do we need a
future
motion to, is it already, it's already been adopted, has it not, as part of his contract?
Was it a part of the contract?
Yeah,
Then-
so we don't need to revise it. We don't have any
Nope,
changes
we have
to
no
it.
changes.
Okay, all right, so we don't need to do that on 2.04. On 2.05, Neil, do you want to run through that action to designate the Washoe County School District Chief Human Resources Officer as the primary point of contact for JG Consulting?
If you don't mind, I'll just do it from here.
Sure,
Save
yes,
time.
please, yes, please do.
But basically, we thought after discussing things that normally your superintendent, in this case the interim superintendent, would be your point of contact in these circumstances. Obviously, she's an applicant. So we thought it would be appropriate to have somebody appointed so that JG knows who to work with, and the person that made the most sense was Emily. And so that's
Okay.
our recommendation from your legal team.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to that effect. Dr. Taylor?
Madam President, I move that the Board of
Okay.
Trustees approves the designation of the district's Chief Human Resources Officer as the primary point of contact for JG Consulting, LLC, and authorizes the Chief Human Resources Officer to work with members of the district's leadership team and their departments to perform work as needed in support of the superintendent search process.
Okay, do we have a second on that? Second by Trustee Minetto, and we have public comment on that item.
Todd Bailey.
Quickly, Madam President, on July 23rd and August 13th, those two board meetings, the Chief Human Resources Officer publicly stated that she could not be the primary person or gatekeeper of the superintendent search process for the following reasons, and the board voted to agree with her. Quote, does not want to be involved in hiring the next boss. Quote, does not have experience screening superintendents. Quote, does not want to be in the driver's seat. Quote, the cost of her time. Quote, wants to have a defensible process. She should recuse herself. Trustees also made affirming comments along those lines. It would be awkward for staff to manage the selection of the next boss. And also, quote, a lot of other things to do. The need, in fact, required the district to spend over $30,000 on a superintendent search that was specifically for these reasons. It is unexpected that now that there is more than enough time to be the gatekeeper of the process. That is very unexpected. For the reasons articulated by the honest and honorable Chief Human Resources Officer, because she did do a great job as far as up to this point selecting the firm to do it. However, now we strongly recommend that the Washoe County School Board of Trustees appoint someone else to handle this going forward, create a firewall to have it as a defensible process. And we would suggest, for instance, Andrea Sullivan, who I believe that's her name, who normally handles these duties as the district purchasing officer and who normally manages outside contracts and vendors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey, and certainly the role of having the search consultant is the person who is managing the process. We have various support staff issues that need to be scheduled, clarification of contact with, rather than having our consultant work with the communications officer on one thing and work with the scheduling secretary on another thing, we want to have a point of contact that is not that she is managing the process. It is to be able to make sure that we, again, it would otherwise be the deputy or interim superintendent who cannot be functioning in this role. So it's a very different role than managing the process, which was the decision we were making, and that's what we were deliberating on. Should we have an outside firm or should we have it done internally? So that was a very different decision. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Just going to say that's absolutely the intention of the motion. Because they certainly don't want her to be in an uncomfortable or inappropriate position, but someone needs to serve as the gatekeeper.
Correct. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thank you for getting through that. Do we have any additional public comment? Okay. No public comment, so we will adjourn the work session of the Board of Trustees.